In this video, I'm going to run you through the exact training progression structure that I have used for the last 10 years. It's exactly what helped me go from a guy who'd been training for about 7 years, barely looking like I lifted, to, well, looking like this. So, safe to say, it got me a pretty impressive transformation. But the reason this works so well is because it's ridiculously simple to follow, like you cannot mess it up, and also because it uses the basic principles of building muscle. So hopefully by now you understand that in order to build muscle, you need to be getting stronger. It's the best indicator that you've built muscle, because you've got to realize, right, when it comes to building muscle, especially naturally, it's a really slow process. Yes, in your first couple of months when you're brand new to the gym, you can build a decent amount of muscle that's quite noticeable over a couple of months. But once you've been in the gym for more than 6 months, the difference visually and on the scale in terms of how many grams of muscle you actually build, it's just not really something that you can measure. You might take a photo a month or two apart and maybe you look better in one photo, but how do you know it's not just because you were posing better, it was better lighting, you had a pump? Long story short, measuring muscle growth in visual ways or on the scales, it's really difficult over short to medium periods of time. However, getting stronger, that does work. And the reason for this is simple. If you have gotten stronger over a period of 6 months, let's say on the bench press, and during that time your technique stayed the same, you were doing the same amount of reps, you were doing the same range of motion, but the only thing that changed is now you're able to get an extra 10 kilos. That strength increase had to have come from somewhere. So if you've gotten stronger and you're able to move more weight, the reason that has happened is because your muscles can produce more force. And the reason they can produce more force is because they've gotten bigger. So yeah, long story short, you need to be tracking your lifts, keeping your logbook, making sure that over time your numbers are going up in the right direction. Now, the usual way that a lot of guys try and progress in the gym is they simply pick the exercises they're doing, they pick a certain number of reps, and they'll do a certain amount of weight. Every now and then, when they feel like it, usually, they'll just go, I'm gonna try lift an extra 5 kilos. I'm gonna try and get a PB. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the problem is, you're not gonna be building a noticeable amount of muscle that's gonna be adding an extra amount of weight every single week. And also, it's just throwing shit at the wall. Just going into the gym, picking random weights, trying for PBs when you feel like it. That is not a structure. That's not a system, and it's not going to get you where you want. So the method I love using, and like I said, I have used this for the last 10 years. It's what helped me get my original transformation. It's what I still use to this day, and it's what I teach my clients. It's called the double progression model. And the reason it's called double progression is pretty simple. It's because it involves 2 forms of progression: progressing with your reps and progressing with the weight. So in order to use double progression, what you're going to do, and you apply this to every single exercise that you do in your workouts, instead of aiming for a certain number of reps, so let's say you're doing 3 sets, and normally you would do 3 sets of 10 or 3 sets of 12. What you're going to do instead is expand it into a rep range. Now, rep ranges are not something new. You've probably used them before: 8 to 12, 4 to 6, 10 to 20, whatever. The rep range itself doesn't matter. Obviously, certain exercises might be better within higher rep ranges, and some movements might work better with lower rep ranges. But the point is, once you have a given rep range for an exercise, what you're going to do then is pick a weight that you know you can do with good technique within that rep range. And ideally, you want to reach failure within the rep range, preferably towards the top end. So let's say we're doing bench press and we have chosen to do the 5 to 8 rep range. We want to pick a weight that we know we can reach failure somewhere between 5 and 8 reps. So let's say we pick 60 kilos and you're able to get 6 reps, and you go for that 7th rep, but you can't get it. You have to get someone to spot you. So you know that 6 reps with 60 kilos, that is the most you can do at the moment. Now, instead of just trying to add weight and go up in strength, what you're going to do instead is the next time you go into the gym, you're going to stick with that same weight, right? And this is why it's important to keep a logbook, because you need to be looking back at what you lifted. Do not kid yourself and say, yeah, I know what weight I lifted, because you cannot remember everything. Write it down, keep a record of it. So the next time you go into the gym, you're going to look at that and see that you did 60 kilos for 6 reps. And all you're going to do in this workout is, your goal is to try and beat that number. You're going to keep the weight the same, because remember, we're still working within that 5 to 8 rep range, but you're going to try and get 7 reps. Now, here's the thing. You might not get it. you might only get 6 reps again. You may have to stick at a certain weight for a couple of weeks before you're able to get that additional rep. But here's what's going to happen. This is the magic, right? Because you're assuming that you're using good technique, you're keeping the range of motion consistent. Every time you go in and do those 6 reps where you're taking it close to failure, because it's taking close to failure, that's going to be stimulating more muscle to grow, provided that you're eating enough protein, you're resting, you're recovering outside of the gym. So over the weeks, small amounts of muscle are going to get built. Very small amounts, not going to be noticeable, but eventually those small amounts of muscle that are getting built from training close to failure, that is going to reflect itself in your ability to now get the 7th rep. And you'll go into the gym one day, you'll look at your logbook and see that you've been stuck on 60 kilos for 6 reps for a couple of weeks. You'll go for that 7th rep and you'll get it. Perfect. Now what do you do? Pretty simple, because we're still within that 5 to 8 rep range. The next week, you go into the gym, and all you're trying to do is beat that 7th rep. You're trying to get 8 reps. And you just repeat this process. You go up in reps, you're trying to get towards the top of the rep range. Now, once you can get to the top of the rep range, once you've got that 8th rep, this is where it gets interesting. Now you're ready to increase the weight. So we might go from 60 kilos up to 62.5 kilos. Very small increase. We're not trying to add 5 or 10 kilos because you're probably not ready to lift that weight yet. Now, because you add weight, what's going to happen? You're probably going to get less reps. And this is the difference between following it with a rep range rather than just certain reps. Most people, right, when they just aim for a certain number of reps and they add weight, but then they lose reps, they think, whoa, it's not working. I didn't get my 8 reps or my 10 reps. So they go back to the original weight they were lifting. But this is the great thing about the double progression model. It allows you to increase the weight, and you accept that because of that, your reps are slightly going to decrease. So whereas before you'd managed to build up to getting 60 kilos for 6 reps, then 7 reps, and then eventually 8 reps, now you've increased the weight to 62.5, you might only get 5 or 6 reps, right? So you're right at the bottom of the rep range. But now all you do is just repeat the process. You keep that new weight, the 62.5 kilos, and you go into the gym and you try and beat what you did. So the first time you try 62.5, you might only get 5 reps. So next time you go in to do that workout, you're now aiming for 6 reps. You're just trying to beat it by 1 rep. And that is it. Honestly, I know it sounds so simple, and if anything, it's a little bit boring. Just trying to do an extra rep and then waiting until you can hit the top of the rep range before you increase the weight. But like I said, this is the training method that completely changed things for me. It's not even something revolutionary. I'm not here to tell you that I've got some special secret that's gonna completely transform your training. This is a well-known training principle, but a lot of guys just do not seem to do it, or they don't even have any system that they're following. And you can apply this with every single exercise, with every different rep range. Doesn't matter if you're doing squats in the 4 to 6 rep range or bicep curls in the 10 to 15 rep range. You pick a weight that allows you to reach failure or get close to failure within the rep range. Every week you then try and beat the previous week by adding a rep. You keep going until you can hit the top of the rep range, and then, only then, you add a very small amount of weight, and then you go back to the bottom of the rep range and you start again. If you repeat this process for not just weeks, not even months, you do this for years, you will be guaranteed that you're always training hard enough, you're training close to failure because you're always trying to beat what you did the last week, and you will be increasing that stimulus as your muscles grow. So as they grow, they get stronger, they can produce more force, they need more weight so that they continue to reach failure, and you just rinse and repeat that process for years. The only difference, the only thing to bear in mind is that the longer you've been training, the slower this progression will be. There will be weeks, and I experience this a lot now, there are weeks where I don't add a rep. I have to stick with the same weight for the same number of reps. Sometimes I even lose a rep. It doesn't always go upwards in a linear fashion. It goes up and down, but over the long term, over 6 months, 12 months, it does go up. And honestly, in your first year or so of doing this, you should be seeing progress every week or every couple of weeks. So that is the double progression model. Like I said, it is one of the biggest game changers for me. It was what allowed me to get my transformation back in 2016, 2017. Start using it. It will help you build more muscle. The only thing is you've just got to do it consistently. Like I said, it's boring, but very often the boring stuff is what works. If you found this helpful, then drop a like. And if you've got any further questions, if you want to know how my one-to-one coaching works, then just drop me a message on Instagram or Facebook and we can have a chat there. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.